We have spent the last couple of weeks talking about what it means to have enough, to discover joy through simplicity and generosity. And today we're going to talk about what it means to be content, what it looks like to be discontent, and how we can learn to become that way if we're not. Now, at one point or another, we've probably all thought about something. There might even be people in this room that have had to make this decision, this choice. The order comes that you have to evacuate your home within the next few minutes. What do you take? You can't take it all. So what do you take? Maybe it would be family photos, important papers that you're going to need. How difficult would it be for you to have to choose what few possessions mean enough to you to place them in higher priority over everything else? It's traumatic occurrences like that happen that remind us that everything in this life is temporary. We've all heard the jokes about not being able to take it with you when you're gone. Like the man who arrives up at heaven with a very heavy suitcase. And St. Peter asks him, well, what's in your suitcase? Everything you need is going to be in here. You don't need to bring that with you. But the man insists, I have to take the suitcase with me. And so Peter finally relents and lets him take it in. And later on that they find out that the suitcase is full of gold bars. And St. Peter and all of the angels are very confused, trying to figure out why this man brought a bunch of pavement with him into heaven. Luke 12, verse 15 tells us that a person's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And yet the world tells us the exact opposite. Jesus tells us that our lives consist of more than money, but culture shouts at us that that is not true. And despite us saying that we believe Jesus' words, we still devote a lot of time and talent and resources to acquiring more stuff. We say that our lives don't consist in abundance of possessions, but yet we live as if it does. A couple of weeks ago, I introduced us to two ailments that we can suffer from. Credititis, which is the idea of accumulating stuff today that you don't have to pay for until tomorrow. And affluenza, the idea that our worth, our how we're viewed by our neighbors and people around us, how we're viewed is based on what we have. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about another disease that affects us, RHS, restless heart syndrome. Now, perhaps you've heard of restless leg syndrome, where people describe uncomfortable feelings in their legs like itching and tingling and pain. It always seems like the legs are just moving in some way. Well, RHS, restless heart syndrome, works in much the same way, only with our heart. Now, the primary symptom of RHS is discontentment. And it manifests itself in never being satisfied with anything. We acquire something and we hardly take any time to enjoy it before we want something else. And this disease can progress to the point where we can become perennially discontent. And if left unchecked, RHS can destroy us. Now, we are designed to be discontent about some things. God wired us this way in order that we would seek the only one who can fully satisfy us. However, while there are certain things that we are supposed to be discontent with, there's a whole lot of other stuff that we are supposed to be content with. The problem is we mix them up. The 18th century Scottish philosopher James Mackintosh once said, "It is right to be contented with what we have, never with what we are." We're not supposed to settle when it comes to who we are. The issue is that we tend to be content with the things that we should be discontented with and trying to gain more. Here's what I mean. Many of us are content with the relationship that we have with God right now instead of wanting more of God. We are content with how much we love others instead of growing in love. We're content with the amount of time that we spend reading and studying the Bible when we should be longing to do it more. Oppositely, we aren't content with the things that we should be content with. We are discontent with our stuff, our houses, our cars, TVs, clothes, whatever you want to put in that category. We can be discontent with our jobs and seek out better jobs that have better bosses or a bigger paycheck. We can be discontent with our families. As children, how many of us thought, man, if only they were my parents instead of the parents that I have, things would be so much better. Well, then we grow up and we have kids of our own and we think, man, if my kids could be more like those kids, my life would be better. We can be discontent with our spouse, comparing him or her to others, and imagine how much happier we'd be if we were married to someone else. We can be discontent with our church. We see that it isn't perfect, that it has a couple of warts. We focus on those things, and then we begin to only see the bad things, and then we go in search of a better church. When we think like that, when we say things like that, what we're really saying is this: God, I don't like what you've given me. I want something else. I want to trade it in, and I want to get something better than what you have already given to me. Now, luckily, there is a treatment for restless heart syndrome. To recover from RHS, we need to cultivate contentment. We need to simplify our lives, and we need to stock up on self-control. Excuse me just a minute. Amy, you got to get more self-control. I'm preaching to myself here too, folks. So here's a cure. Let me lay it out for you. There are 4 keys to cultivating contentment. The first, even though it is a cliche, is to remember that it could always be worse. We sometimes use that phrase almost tongue-in-cheek. When things are really bad, well, it could be worse. But when you stop to think about it, that's looking on the bad side of things. Practice looking for the bright side. Practice looking for the silver lining. And there's always a silver lining. That's okay. It's there. When you get in your car and it's an older model, It could be worse. You could not have a car. When you find all the things in your house that need to be replaced or repaired, at least you have a house. Many don't. When you are frustrated or you're disappointed with your spouse, it could be worse. You have a spouse. Many people no longer are able to say that. The second key is to ask, how long will this make me happy? Will purchasing something, an item, bring you sustaining satisfaction, or will it just make you happy for a little bit? One possible way to help decide this is to try before you buy. Rent the car that you're considering buying for a couple of days. Borrow an item that you're thinking of purchasing from a friend. You might discover that whatever that item is, it's not worth the expense. The third key is to develop a grateful heart. And that is one of the most important keys to contentment and happiness. In fact, it's essential if we hope to be content. A grateful heart recognizes that all of life is a gift. Contentment comes when we spend more time giving thanks for what we have rather than thinking about what we don't or thinking about what's wrong. In any situation, we can complain or we can be grateful. It's a choice. We can choose to focus on the bad things or to give thanks for the blessings that we have. The fourth key is to ask yourself, where does my soul find true satisfaction? Now, the world tells us that satisfaction is found in ease, in luxury, in comfort, in money. The Bible tells us that true satisfaction is found in God alone. St. Augustine wrote over 1,600 years ago that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. Christ is the one who satisfies every need and enables us to be content in all circumstances. He gave us the great commandment of loving the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. If we focus on those two things, we will find satisfaction for our soul, and we will find lasting contentment. But we won't find complete contentment unless we learn how to simplify our lives. Simplicity says that less is more. It says that we don't need as much as we think we do. We're often like hamsters running on a wheel. We're running and we're running and we're running and we're going and we're going and we're going, but we don't have a clue where we're going. We don't know when we're going to get there. But we just keep running like crazy to keep that wheel going and to keep up with others. And we consume a lot in doing this. Every year, 1.2 billion trees are consumed to make packaging and paper and napkins and bags that we use. 2.5 million plastic bottles are used every hour, not day, hour. The United States has 5% of the world's population, and yet we produce 40% of the world's garbage. Over 1,600 pounds per person per year. We have to make a conscious decision to get off of the hamster wheel. But how do we do it? Well, first, set a goal of reducing your consumption and choose to live below your means. Use reusable canvas bags when you go grocery shopping. Look at the mid-grade item rather than the top-of-the-line item when you make a purchase. Adjust your thermostat when you're away. Second, before making a purchase, ask yourself, do I really need this or do I want this? Now, am I saying never buy anything that you want? No. Sometimes that pretty purse, just you want it and you get it. But don't do it all the time. Do I need it or do I want it? And if you do want it, ask yourself, why? These questions help determine the true motivation of your desire. Is the purchase something that you need, or are you wanting it to help fulfill another need, like making yourself feel better about something? Do you really need the new outfit, or are you just doing a little retail therapy? What you can discover is that maybe your reason for making that purchase isn't necessarily a good one. Maybe it's camouflaging something else entirely. Third, use something up before buying new. Now, sometimes that isn't possible. But when it is, make sure that something is completely used up before replacing it. We got our daughter when she was in high school a used 2007 Mitsubishi Lancer that had 70-some-odd thousand miles on it. Bought it in 2012, I think, with the instructions, you are going to drive this until it dies. She did. When you get the call from the mechanic that says the bill to replace it is going to be more than the car is worth, that's when you start thinking, okay. So she drove that car from 2012, put about another 80,000 miles on it, and we buried Lance, the Lancer, earlier this year. He went to that great big car lot in the sky. Could she have had a new car, a different car before then? Yeah. But she did as we told her, drive it till it dies. When you replace it, whatever it is that is no longer working or it's used up, purchase it with something that's meant to last. Take better care of the things that you have and make repairs instead of just trashing it when it stops working. Remind yourself that you don't always need to purchase something new. Fourth, and this is something, I need the mirror. I need to be looking at myself. Plan low-cost entertainment that enriches. Do things that are simple and cheap. How many times do we go on vacation and we spend tons of money and we run around doing all of these things and we come back exhausted, when really all we needed to do was lie around and relax? Sometimes we think that we have to spend money to have fun, and we don't always. Finally, the fifth idea. Ask yourself, are there major changes that would allow me to simplify my life? The stress of living beyond our means can kill us. Making payments when the funds aren't there causes stress. What if you sold the car that has a high monthly payment and bought something less expensive, owning it free and clear? And if your car is paid off, keep it longer before buying another one. The same can be said for our houses. Bigger houses mean larger mortgages, bigger utility bills, bigger property taxes, more clean, more furniture to purchase. Is there a club membership that you hardly use? What could that money be going toward instead? And finally, we have to work on self-control. We have to work on self-control. Work on self-control. Self-control acts like a wall around our heart and life that protects us from ourselves, from temptation, from sins that can destroy us. If you don't exercise self-control with possessions, you can be led to financial ruin. We become a slave to our things instead of using our things to work for us. We become a slave to our desire to acquire more. Self-control comes down to choosing to satisfy an impulse to gain instant gratification or not act upon it for a higher cause or a greater gratification later. It's about stopping to ask yourself 3 questions. What are the long-term consequences of this action? Is there a greater good or better outcome if I use this resource of time, money, or energy in another way? And third, will this action honor God? So we have a choice to make. What tent are we going to live in? Discontentment or contentment? Now, like I said, this doesn't mean that we stop buying things or that we move into smaller homes where we're going to be crowded. That's not required by God. Choosing contentment means that we look to God as our source of everything that we need and give thanks to Him for everything that we have. It means that we ask God to change our hearts and minds and give us the right perspective on money and possessions. It means that we decide to live simpler lives, wasting less and conserving more. It means we choose to live more generously. Last week, you received a sticker that had 6 financial planning principles to help manage your money. If you didn't get one of those last week or you want another one, they're on the table outside in the narthex underneath the blue banner out there. Well, today, I have another gift for you. It's a key ring, and it has a prayer on it. And it's a great way to help you when you are in the midst of making a decision of whether or not to purchase something. The prayer says this: Lord, help me to be grateful for what I have, to remember that I don't need most of what I want, and that joy is found in simplicity and generosity. I need a couple of volunteers again today. Do I have some of my girls? Heck, Kevin, let's put you to work. Becky, would you do this side? There are plenty. If you want to take 2, there are plenty to do that. If you're like me, you have 3 or 4 different sets of keys. I would encourage you to take this and put it on your key ring. I would encourage you to choose contentment by focusing on what really and truly satisfies and discovering true joy through simplicity. Amen.